Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to our series on close study of the Arabic text of Nawawi's commentary on the Sahih of Muslim. In our previous discussion, we explored various scholarly views on whether Iman, that is faith, increases or decreases. Today we will continue that discussion by delving into the statement of another prominent scholar, Ibn Baṭṭāl, as quoted by Imam Nawawi. This will further expand our understanding of the term Iman and Islam, as well as the major viewpoints on these concepts in Islamic thought. So Imam Nawawi says, وقال Imam Abu Hassan Ali ibn Khalaf ibn Baṭṭāl al-Maliki al-Maghribi fi Sharh Sahih al-Bukhari. And Imam Abu Hassan Ali bin Khalaf bin Baṭṭāl al-Maliki Maghribi says in his commentary on Sahih of al-Bukhari, Mazhabu Jama'ati Ahli Sunnati min Salafil Ummati wa Khalafiha, the viewpoint of the group of a collection of the Mazhabu Jama'ati Ahli Sunnati min Salafil Ummati wa Khalafiha, the viewpoint of the collection of Ahli Sunnah, people of the Sunnah, min Salafil Ummah, from the Salaf of the Ummah, means that the earlier pious generation of the Ummah, wa Khalafiha, and later generations, is that Annal Iman Qawlun, that Iman is statement, wa Amalun, and action. Yazidu, it increases, wa Yankusu, and decreases. Wal hujjatu ala ziyadatihi wa nuqsanihi, the argument for increase and decrease in it, ma awradahu al-Bukhari, is found in what al-Bukhari has mentioned, min al-ayati, of the verses, yani, that is, qawlahu azza wa jal, Allah Almighty is saying, liyazdadu imanan, so that they increase in their faith, ma imanihim, that is, they add faith to their faith. Wa qawlahu ta'ala, qawlahu I have read it as qawlahu instead of qawluhu because it's the direct subject of the verb yani qawlahu. Wa qawlahu ta'ala, and Allah Almighty is saying, wazidnahum huda, we increase them in guidance. This is verse 13 of Surah 18. Wa qawlahu ta'ala, and Allah is saying, wa yazidul lazina ihtadaw huda, Allah further enlightens those who seek guidance. This is verse 76 of Surah 19. Wa qawlahu ta'ala, wal lazina ihtadaw zadahum huda, those who follow guidance, He increases them in guidance. This is verse 17 of Surah 47. Wa qawlahu ta'ala, wa yazdad al-lazina amanu īmāna, those who believe may increase in faith. This is verse 31 of Surah 74. Wa qawlahu ta'ala, and Allah is saying, ayyukum zadathu hadhihi īmāna, which of you has had his faith increased by it. It's referring to something, and a question, and the verse takes the form of a question, and then offers a comment. فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, as for those who believe, فَزَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا, it has increased to their faith. Now this is verse 9, so verse 124 of Surah 9. وَقَوْلَهُ تَعَالَى فَخْشَوْهُمْ فَزَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا, فَزَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا, rather it added to their faith. This is Surah Al-Imran, verse 173. وَقَوْلَهُ تَعَالَى, and Allah is saying, وَمَا زَادَهُمْ, and it did not increase, إِلَّا إِيمَانٌ وَتَسْلِيمًا, but their faith and submission. This is Surah 33 and verse 22. These are the verses that Imam al-Bukhari quoted, and Imam Ibn Baṭṭāl says that these verses prove that Iman is subject to increase and decrease. For the entire session today, we will be discussing the statement of Ibn Baṭṭāl. So Ibn Baṭṭāl continues, فَإِيمَانُ مَنْ لَمْ تَحْصُلْ لَهُ الزِّيَادَةُ نَاقِصٌ. Therefore, the Iman of someone, مَنْ لَمْ تَحْصُلْ لَهُ الزِّيَادَةُ, who does not experience an increase in his Iman, naqisun, is deficient. The faith of somebody whose faith does not increase, actually his faith is deficient. Qala, he says, فَإِنْ قِيلَ, if someone objects to our view and says, al-imanu fil lugati, in Arabic language, Iman is at-tasdeequ, is affirmation, and that is affirmation of the heart, of mind. It does not extend to linguistically, at least it does not extend to actions and sayings. Fal jawabu, so our response is anna tasdeeqa, that this affirmation of the heart yakmulu becomes complete bitta'ati kulliha, with all the obediences. فَمَزْدَادَ الْمُؤْمِنُ, so a believer does not add, so whatever the believer adds, min amal al-birri, of the righteous deeds, kana imanuhu akmal, his iman becomes correspondingly perfect. You know, the more actions, the more pious deeds he earns or he performs, the more his Iman is perfected. وَبِهَذِهِ الْجُمْلَةِ يَزِيدُ الْإِيمَانُ, and due to the correction of these good things, of these good deeds, يَزِيدُ الْإِيمَانُ, Iman increases. وَبِنُقْصَانِهَا, and if his actions are actually, if there is a loss in his good deeds, يَنْكُسُ, his Iman also decreases in correspondence. فَمَتَى نَكَسَتْ أَعْمَالُ الْبِرِّ, therefore when the pious deeds are deficient, نَكَسَ كَمَالُ الْإِيمَانِ, there is a dent in the perfection of faith. وَمَتَى زَادَتْ, and when the good deeds increase, زَادَ الْإِيمَانُ كَمَالًا, Iman gains more and more perfection. Haza tawassutul qawli, this is actually a viewpoint that is most balanced concerning fil imani, about Iman. Wa amma tasdeequ billahi ta'ala, as far as affirmation of faith in Allah Almighty, wa rasulihi, and belief in his messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, fala yankusu, that does not suffer decrease. So Iman itself, Iman in Allah and Iman the Prophet, does not, in the sense of tasdeeq, affirmation, that does not decrease. Walizalika, and for this reason, tawakkafa Malikun, Imam Malik held his position, or he did not hold that, fi ba'zi riwayati, according to some of the narrations that have come down from him, about anil qawli bin nuqsan, about his viewpoint on the position that Iman suffers decrease, is la yajuzu nuqsanu tasdeeq. Tasdeeq cannot, affirmation of the heart cannot suffer from deficiency. If it does, li'annahu idha nakasa, because idha nakasa, when Iman becomes deficient, sara shakkan, it becomes doubt, wa kharajan ismil Iman, and therefore it goes out of the sphere of the term of Iman. Ibn Baṭṭāl continues, وَقَالَ بَعْضُهُمْ, and some of the scholars have said, or one scholar has said, إِنَّمَا تَوَكَّفَ مَالِكٌ, Imam Malik did not express clearly, or he held back the position of saying that Iman anil qawl bi nuqsan al iman. He held back from stating that Iman can be subject to decrease. Is that khashyata? He did not do so because he feared an yata'awwala alayhi muwafaqatul khawarij, that people could interpret his view to be in conformity with the viewpoint of the Khawarij allazina yukaffiruna ala al-ma'asi, who excommunicate the people who commit sins from among the believers, min al-mu'minina biz-zunubi, due to their sins. Of course, Muslims commit sins and believers also commit sins. And one group, that is the Kharijites, they believe that, and they strongly believed, and they actually fought on this with the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. They held that, and they were very strict, that a person who commits a major sin becomes kafir. They excommunicate him, they declare him kafir. وَقَدْ قَالَ مَالِكٌ. However, Imam Malik has indeed said بِنُقْصَانِ الْإِيمَانِ, that Iman suffers deficiency, Iman suffers decrease, مِثْلَ قَوْلِ جَمَاعَةِ أَهْلِ السُنَّةِ, just like the rest of the party of Ahl Sunnah held. He now quotes the argument for this view, that Imam Malik actually held the view that, and he did not always stop from saying that Iman suffers from decrease. Qala Abdul Razak, the author of Al-Musannaf, the famous Abdul Razak, said, Sami'tu man adraktu min shuyukhina, I heard from our sheikhs, our teachers, whom I met, was Khabina, and our companions, including Sufyan al-Sawri, wa Malik ibn Anas, and Malik ibn Anas, wa Ubaidullah ibn Umar, wa Ubaidullah ibn Umar, and Ubaidullah ibn Umar, wal-Awza'iyya, wal-Ma'mar ibn Rashid, wal-Awza'i, and Awza'i, and Ma'mar bin Rashid, wa ibn Jurayh, wa Sufyan ibn Uyayna, and Sufyan ibn Uyayna, yaquluna, saying, al-Imanu qawlun wa amalun, Iman is statement and action, yazidu wa yankusu, it increases and decreases, yazidu wa yankusu, wa hadha qawlu ibn Mas'udin, and this is also the viewpoint of Ibn Mas'ud rahimahullah, raziyallahu ta'ala anhu. He is the companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wa Huzaifata, and Huzaifa raziyallahu anhu, wa Nakhai, Imam Ibrahim al-Nakhi, wal Hasan al-Basri, the famous Hasan al-Basri, wa Ata, wa Tawus, wa Mujahid, Ata, Tawus, Mujahid, and Abdullah ibn Mubarak. So he says that I heard these scholars hold the viewpoint that he ascribes to those who he met, and of course ascribes to others he did not meet through other authorities, but he says that these scholars held the view that Iman is actually statement and action both. Falmana alladhi yastahiqu bil abd, something that makes a person deserving al-madha wal-wilayata min al-mu'minin, praise and association from the believers, is ityanuhu bihadhihi al-umur al-salasa, that he does these three things, that he performs these three things, or he accomplishes these three things, and they are at-tasdeequ bil-qalbi, a firm belief in the heart, affirmation of the heart, wal iqrar bil lisani, and statement by the tongue, wal amalu bil jawarihi, and action by the body organs. Wazalika, and the reason is annahu la khilafa bain al jami', there is no difference among the entire scholarship. أنه لو أقر وعمل على غير علم منه, if a person acknowledges belief, makes a statement about his belief, and acts upon something that is the amila ala ghairi ilmin, he acts upon the Islamic rulings and Islamic practices ala ghairi ilmin, without knowing, minhu, that is, he does not know why he is doing this, wa ma'rifatin bi rabbihi, and he does not know his God, his Lord, la yastahiqqu isma mu'minin, he does not deserve to be called a mu'min. Walau arafahu wa amila, on the other hand, if he knows this, wa amila, and then acts upon it, wajahada bilisanihi, but goes against it, opposes it, and negates it with his tongue, wa kazaba, and denies ma arafa min at-tawhid, the tawhid that he knows and believes in his heart, la yastahiqqu isma mu'minin, he too does not deserve to be called a Muslim. Wa kadhalika idha akarra, and similarly if he admits billahi ta'ala, that there is Allah Almighty, wa birusulihi, and that he has sent messengers salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'in, wa lam ya'mal bil faraiz, but he does not act upon the obligations, the religious obligations, la yusamma mu'minan, he too is not called mu'min bil itlaq, means in absolute terms. If he is called a mu'min, that is actually with certain conditions and certain qualifications. Wa in kana fi kalam al-arabi, even though according to the language of the Arabs he can be called yusamma, he can be called mu'minan, a believer, bit tasdeeq, merely because of his inner affirmation in the heart. فَذَلِكَ غَيْرُ مُسْتَحَقٍ فِي كَلَامِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى, however, according to the speech of Allah Almighty, that is the Holy Quran, he does not deserve to be called a believer in absolute terms. لِقَوْلِهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ, because Allah Almighty says, إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون الذين يقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا. إنما المؤمنون, believers are such, الذين إذا ذكر الله, that when Allah Almighty is reminded or is mentioned before them, wajilat qulubuhum, their hearts feel a dread, they become fearful. Wa iza tuliyat alayhim ayatuhu, and when Allah's verses are recited upon them, zadathum imana, these verses add to their faith increases. Wa ala rabbihim yatawakkalun, and they have complete reliance on their Allah, on their Lord. Allazina, those, yuqimuna as-salata, who regularly offer the prayer, wa mimma razaqnahum yunfiqun, and spend out of what we have granted them. Ulaika humul mu'minuna haqqa, actually these are the mu'min in reality, in truth. فَأَخْبَرَنَا سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى, thus the Almighty Allah, the pure and the exalted one, informed us that annal mu'mina, that a believer, a mu'min, is man kanat hazihi sifatuhu, is the one who has these qualities, who has these attributes that have been mentioned in this verse, in these verses. Ibn Baṭṭāl, and Ibn Baṭṭāl says, fi babi man qala al-īmān huwa al-amal. This is a chapter heading of Imam Bukhari's Sahih. So while dealing with this is in this chapter, Ibn Baṭṭāl said, فَإِنْ قِيلَ قَدْ قَدَّمْتُمْ, if it is said you have already acknowledged, أَنَّ الْإِيمَانَ هُوَ التَّصْدِيقُ, that Iman is confirmation. Qila, it will be explained in response, التصديق هو أول منازل الإيمان. confirmation is the first step towards the stages of Iman. وَيُوجِبُ لِلْمُصَدِّقِ, and what Iman earns a person who has affirmation is that is entry into this process. الدخول فيه الدخول في الإيمان ولا يوجب له استكمال منازله. However, it does not necessarily mean that this person has perfected all the stages of Iman. ولا يسمى مؤمنا مطلقا, and so therefore such a person cannot be called mu'min in absolute terms. هذا مذهب جماعة أهل السنة. This is the view of the group of أهل السنة. أن الإيمان قول وعمل, that Iman is statement and action. قال أبو عبيد said وهو قول مالك, and the same is the viewpoint of Malik والثوري والأوزاعي ومن بعدهم. This is the viewpoint of Thawri and Awza'i and those who came after them min arbab al-ilmi, of the scholars was sunnati and adherents of the sunnah, alladhina kanu masabih al-huda, which were the actually beacons of light, beacon of guidance, wa immat al-deen, and the imams of this deen min ahli al-Hijazi, from the people of Hijaz, Iraq, Syria and other places. Qala ibn Baṭṭāl وهذا المعنى, and this meaning, and this is the sense, this is the meaning, this is the reason. أراد البخاري, that Bukhari rahimahullah intended to isbatahu, affirm, fi Kitab al-Iman, in Kitab al-Iman of his Sahih, wa alayhi, and keeping this in mind, bawwaba abwabahu, he chapterized his Kitab al-Iman kullaha, and means entirely. So this is the meaning that Imam Bukhari aimed at establishing in the chapter on Iman, and he actually chapterized the section under the same theme. Babu Umuril Imani, chapter on the issues of faith. Wa Babu Salatu min al Imani, and chapter that Salah is part of faith. Wa Babu Zakatu min al Imani, and chapter on that Zakah is part of faith. Wa Babu Jihadu min al Imani, and the chapter that Jihad is part of faith. Wasairu Babi, and the rest of the chapters. Wa innama arada radda, he intended, and Bukhari intended to reject al murji'a, the viewpoint of the Murji'ites, fi qawlihim, who said innal iman qawlun, Iman is only a statement, bila amalin, and it does not include action. Wa tabyina ghalatihim, Imam Bukhari intended to expose their viewpoint, their mistake, ghalatihim, their mistake, their wrong position, wa su'a i'tiqadihim, and their evil belief, wa mukhalafatihim bil kitab, and their opposition to the book of God, wa sunnati, and the sunnah of the Prophet, wa madhahib al a'immah, and the viewpoints of the different imams. ثم قال ابن بطال, Ibn Baṭṭāl says في باب آخر, in another chapter, قال المهلب says الإسلام على الحقيقة هو الإيمان. Islam in reality is Iman. That is, these two things are same thing. هو الذي هو عقد القلب المصدق. Actually it is the joining of the heart of an affirmer, لإقرار اللساني, with his admission with the tongue, الذي لا ينفع, something other than which nothing is useful, لا ينفع, in the sight of Allah. La yanfa in the Allah Ta'ala, actually the subject of this yanfa comes later, gairu, alladhi la yanfa in the Allah gairu, something other than which nothing can actually benefit in the sight of Allah, before Allah. Wakalat al-Karamiyya, and al-Karamiyya, that is a sect, they said, Wabad al-Murji'a, and some Murji'ites also said, al-Imanu huwa al-Iqrar bil-Lisan, Iman is but declaration with the tongue, duna aqdil qalb, and it does not involve the commitment in the heart. وَمِنْ أَقْوَى مَا يُرَدُّ بِهِ عَلَيْهِمْ, the strongest argument ma yuraddu bihi, through which their view can be rejected, is ijma'ul ummati, is the consensus of the believers, ala ikfar munafiqina, on excommunicating the hypocrites, on declaring that the hypocrites are disbelievers, they are kafir. Wa in kanu, even though kad azaru shahadatain, they apparently expressed the two shahadas, the two declarations of faith, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Qala Allah Ta'ala, Allah Almighty says, وَلَا تُصَلِّ عَلَىٰ أَحَدٍ مِّنْهُمْ مَاتَ أَبَدًا وَلَا تَقُمْ عَلَىٰ قَبْرِهِ إِنَّهُمْ كَفَرُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. وَلَا تُصَلِّ عَلَىٰ أَحَدٍ مِّنْهُمْ مَاتَ أَبَدًا, and never pray for any of them at his death. وَلَا تَقُمْ عَلَىٰ قَبْرِهِ, never stand on his grave. It also means do not supplicate for his forgiveness. إِنَّهُمْ كَفَرُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, for they have disbelieved in Allah and His Messenger. The verse goes on and to end at the words lahum kafirun, while they disbelieve. This is the end of the statement of Ibn Baṭṭāl. Now we can try to summarize the discussion Ibn Baṭṭāl has offered, and it is more or less actually have already passed through the statements of other scholars, and subsequent scholars also will say something similar, because Al-Sunnah have actually more or less the same opinion on this issue, primarily, even though they differ in some detail. So the definition of Iman according to Ibn Baṭṭāl is that Iman is both verbal declaration and corresponding action. Therefore, it can increase or decrease based on righteous deeds, or the lack of righteous deeds and commission of bad deeds. So the core belief is that Iman grows with the good deeds and decreases when actions decline. Confirmation in the heart is essential, but it must be supported by actions to be complete. This is the basic summary of the entire discussion we have read today. Thank you very much for watching. Please share. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the discussion, and please do not hesitate to comment and leave comments or put any question that you have, or for any suggestion that you have for the betterment of this discussion in the future. Thank you very much.